to be able to stand out, I think if you don't want Temu to come and like take your market share away, there are so many things that we can talk about here. The matter of the fact is, brands come to us and they're like, yo, we have an ad problem. Yeah. Right? We have a paid media problem. We have a performance marketing problem. And it doesn't really take that long to dig a bit deeper and then find out that they might have a unit economics problem. They might have a product problem, stuff that it's not a fix the ads, everything's going to work out problem. Welcome back to another episode. We've got Ray here as always. You got myself. The world is falling to shit, at least in the world of D2C. That's what we were talking about, Ray and I, this week. So we figured we're going to bring it to the podcast episode. Ray, this week you brought up Temu, you brought up Shein. Can you get everyone watching up to speed? Why did you bring up Temu and Shein randomly in a meeting that we had?
Yeah. So first of all, if you don't know who Temu and Shein are, they're just massive 9-figure brands. But why they're so successful is they undercut the entire market. So typically their MO is they go directly to the manufacturer, or they're actually the manufacturer themselves, and they'll sell products for a fifth or a tenth of what the market's selling for. So again, it's a free market. People can do what they want, but it's become such a big problem that any brand that has a product that they white label, meaning like it's a product that's already on the market and then they just put their logo on it, you're in deep trouble because those two brands are absolutely crushing people on advertising because they have your product and then their product, and there's a fifth or a tenth of the price side by side, and then it's just killing brands.
Yeah, and I mean, you and I have had several conversations with, either brands we're helping out or consulting or working with that where because they work off of the premise of private label, their product, they're almost the exact same product, like is on there. And that, I think that raises alarm bells, right? And hopefully we're talking about this on the podcast because it could at least raise your alarm bells or get your spidey senses tingling if you're watching this right now to go, well, what can we do so to be able to circumvent this? Maybe let's do a show and tell. For anyone that hasn't heard of Temu, this is what it looks like. I'm going to share my screen right now. This is Temu here, right? And it looks, you go to AliExpress.com, it looks no different. You can argue, yeah, it's not on brand. You can argue that it looks like a joke website, but these guys are dropping just stuff that you would find on AliExpress across an insane like number of verticals. Let me actually just show this here, right? Like all these verticals, they've just got like $1.49, and this captures a big portion of a socioeconomic demo. That is the reality, right? Now, to maybe bring this home, because you're looking at these, maybe someone's thinking, these look like crap. I'm not selling any of these things. Let's look at an item that maybe might be a bit more common. I'm going to share my screen again. I just did a really quick search before we hit record for the iPhone wireless charging station. And right here, you can see already, these are the Google Shopping listings. Wireless charger station, this one, and then this one right here on the third one, doesn't look that different. In fact, I'm looking at this one. I kind of, because the image is small, and so are my eyes. This one here, I kind of like the chrome more than I like the white. And I'm looking at the price and I go, this one's $23 and this one's $159. I'm definitely going to click on this one. I might open a separate tab and look at this one too, but it's not like I'm disregarding this one at all. Like, and notice I'm not even talking about the other ones. This one's $25 right here. It kind of is exactly the same one. And you can see that they've got reviews as well. Almost the same number as this one, right? So to be able to stand out, I think if you don't want Temu to come and like take your market share away, there are so many things that we can talk about here, right? I think that people can do like tactically, because the matter of the fact is, brands come to us and they're like, yo, we have an ad problem. Right? We have a paid media problem. We have a performance marketing problem. And it doesn't really take that long to dig a bit deeper and then find out that they might have a unit economics problem. They might have a product problem. Beyond stuff that is not stuff that it's not a fix the ads, everything's going to work out problem, right? Like maybe let's start at the listing side, the more digital side of things. As we're talking about Temu and places like Temu and Shein, what can a brand do digitally, I guess, whether it's a product listing, it's ad copy, any of that stuff, or what are the things that a brand can do to combat this whole Temu shit show?
I mean,
if
it really
they happen
is.
to have the same product.
Yeah, I was having a debate with another Google advertiser that we don't know how they can't be making money on some of these products. They must be lost leaders, because if you think about it, if you had the money or you're the manufacturer, no one could afford to do products cheaper than you. So you could, for example, lose money for 4 to 5, 6 months if you have enough float, put someone out of business, and then jack up prices. So like, number one, what you can't do is you can't compete on price. That's just a loser's game. So you have to pivot and you have to compete on quality or compete on attention. So the reason why you brought this up this week is we have 2 brands right now just getting absolutely smashed because of Temu. So Temu is swooping in, and their products are their white label products that, frankly, a lot of other people can get. And that's where you're in deep trouble. And Temu is just absolutely undercutting the entire market. So yeah, what person who's price conscious is going to spend 4 or 5 times more for one product when Temu is like right next to it for significantly less? It's just really hard to compete with that. And I think you already teased it. The only way you can compete with it is quality and attention. So let's talk about quality first of all. There actually is something to say of pricing higher, but especially if you have the reviews to back it up. So I'm going to give you an example. So we have a brand, we have several brands who have white labeled products. And what's very interesting, so let me just show this, for example. So first of all, D, you showed the charger, right? What's the first thing that you noticed in some of these? Like, which of these potentially would stick out to you on quality?
Before you move to the left, the one that caught my eye was the one with the dude's head.
Yeah, right. So, right, because it's significantly different. So everyone else has the product on a white background. That's just like everyone's MO. And so sticking out through attention, so that's one way. Another way you mentioned is having higher reviews than everybody else. So here you see Temu, they're just crushing. Then you have this brand. This is the brand we're actually running for right now. They have significantly more reviews. So now, like any normal logical human being will look at this and be like, okay, like this one may be so much less, but man, that one has so much more good star reviews. Like it must just be a better product, right? So that's how you can compete on quality. And then you already teased it already. And the other part is with imagery. So imagery in the shopping title. So this is the one that we're testing. So we're going completely in that field, very bright orange background. You can also do one with a guy's head. And just to kind of sneak peek it, we're testing a lot of different things inside of the ad account. So we have, this one's a high performer. We're testing ones of just the product. We're testing one on people's heads. So in an instance like this, when you're just getting absolutely dominated by Temu and Shein, you've only got 2 levers, especially when it comes to the ad platform: quality, reviews, and or attention, which is the images and the titles.
Yeah. And so then that begs the question, how do you convey quality in a world where the potential customer cannot touch your product? Right? Like, so hence all those small the multiple things that we need to think about and put in there. Because I don't know.
Also, website. I mean, you just showed Temu's website, and it looked like just a dumpster fire. It looked like it was a brand just trying to fire sell a bunch of cheap products. Versus if you actually spend the time and you create a business around a specific product, create a legit business, your business design of the website can actually scream higher quality. So this is where a good argument can be made that a well-designed website actually goes into your favor because it can help support the high quality narrative.
And that right there is where the whole performance versus brand thing comes into conversation. Right there, right?
True.
The performance marketers all talk about, okay, well, conversion. This right here, this moment right here is exactly where if you spend time on user experience on your website and investing into that aesthetic, it pays off and contributes to the conversion, right? Same thing in terms of not only ad concept, but then the on-brandness. This is where the on-brandness really kicks in. It's to get the conversion because of trustworthiness, not because it looks pretty, right? Design aesthetic adds to a certain level of pricing power as well. So I think that's super critical. So if we,
it does. I mean, if you try to sell like a Louis Vuitton bag on a Temu, they'd be like, "Oh, that's a freaking knockoff," whether it is or it isn't, because it commands a price point, commands a higher level of design aesthetic, like you already said.
Right. And in terms of pricing, exactly like you mentioned earlier, this is where the counterintuitive part about pricing kicks into, because certain products like Louis Vuitton, or like if you see this phone and it is visibly an iPhone, but you see it offered for $200, immediately your brain goes, well, one, either it's stolen, or two, it's a knockoff. So
yep.
I think for any brand owners to be able to understand within their space, what is the price elasticity? What is the pricing threshold where it's like, at this price, it comes across like it's cheap and worthless. It detracts from the perceived value of that item, versus if I price it here higher than the market and it's backed up by the reviews, or it's backed up by it's backed up by the copy or the concepts that we put into the way that we talk about the products or our messaging. And we talked about this during the last episode. The brand is clearly investing into some type of street cred because other people are talking about it. And there are videos of users. I don't care whether it's unboxing or whether it's just a vlog where it's getting used, or whether it's just a creator talking about it, touching it, using it, applying it, whether it's on the face or some type of thing like that. It needs to have that effect, because the matter of the fact is, we don't have like the CCP's spending power here like Temu does to be able to just smash the way that they do. And they're going straight to the source, right? Because it's not a brand per se. They are an online marketplace going straight to Chinese vendors and clearly working with those Chinese vendors as well. And I don't know if you know about how, like, you guys know about how most Chinese businesses are run. Ask Jack Ma. There is a very heavy element of state control involved here. So this isn't just some kind of private company on their own working in that environment. They've got a lot of backing to just like clean up shop. So it's kind of nutty in that way. So let's talk about the beyond the price.
I think real quick, when you on the street cred, I think that's a great example why it may be easy to start, yes, an e-commerce business, drop shipping or white labeling, but if you want to have a long-term sustainable business, there's a lot of groundwork that you just mentioned that goes into having a long-term business that people actually want. Like, there's a lot of getting influencers, getting people to talk about it, building that street cred. Like, that That's not a short-term game. That's a very long-term game. And that's really what separates people that actually build a long-term business that people want to buy versus, a lot of people that just want to have a drop shipping business or a business get up and running very quickly. And that's like you mentioned last time in the last episode around the street cred. And I think that's so important because the business that we have that started white labeling, that's the process they've had to go through over the last 3 to 4 years to build a very successful, notable brand. But along the way, they eventually went away from the white labeling. But that right there, man, like if you want to build a business that people actually want to buy from and you want to exit, the street cred that what you talked about, D, that is the pathway you have to go on. And it's not easy. It's long.
For sure. And if you're too lazy to watch the previous episode, street cred, all I'm talking about here is utilizing influencers, content creators, making noise in the market, right? But the noise isn't made by your brand. The noise is made by others. So you want as many reviews as possible. You want as many not only written reviews and not only the stars, but also video reviews, video testimonials, people just using it, authentic. You can do like video listicles where it's a person doing a haul and they're trying all the different ones. And it's like, oh, this one kind of okay. This one right here, I really, really love, right? That one over there, too expensive. It's not worth the money. Stuff like that. So it's I guess, internet marketing PR, if you will, but also don't disregard PR itself, getting onto certain notable publications. I mean, we've got clients that literally their entire business's success came from that pop, and that pop launched them into that next level. Especially if this is a brand that you are taking, you have intentions to take to that next level, and then like get to an exit or get to some level of notoriety. That's the. I know we went through a lot. That type of a lot condensed into what we've been talking for like 20 minutes. That level of a lot, we sit down with the brands that come to us and look through in that type of way. Not in this kind of meandering way, but going through the framework to go, well, sure, we can come up with concepts, but let's look at what the market is doing. Let's look at how you position against the market. Let's look also at your product itself and do research around competitors, how they're positioning it, how you're positioning it. And then there's this other component, which more and more so, I believe, that's the reason why we're doing it, I guess. I believe that it's an unavoidable part of the work to get good at if you are running media for a company as an agency, or in-house if you're looking for a job to work in a D2C firm, is having to look at like unit economics, right? To then understand, because MER targets aren't arbitrary. You don't set MER targets based off of what like someone on the internet said, this is how you should set MER targets. It's based on your numbers, much in the same way you just don't set net profit targets for a company just based off of like, oh, well, the industry, Google told me or GPT told me it should be at 25%. So 25% is it. We use a sheet that that on calls we ground the discussion around numbers. Can we play around with that sheet and kind of get deep in this area? Because from a unit economic standpoint, how this ties to the Temu thing is, and the entire thing around positioning and getting a brand up into the level of where it needs to get to, even to just have ads run well and also have targets be attainable but yet aggressive, is the fact that if the numbers are hinging purely on the fact that someone has, like the brand has, I don't know, new ad account, they're going in there for the first 6 months, CPMs were low. And that is the only reason why they managed to get what they got. That is just like pretty much counting on luck. Right? I saw that.
Luck, and also maybe headwinds like COVID or something you just piggybacked off of.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Right. But it's definitely it's definitely a thing that we take into consideration across like every metric leading up to the cost to acquire a customer metric, right? So if you can bring that sheet up, maybe this is a good place.
So there's two sheets actually. So the first sheet I want to show is, so this is a sheet that we do when we work with brands just to get all of their products and understand all of the little economic numbers we need to know. So for example, this is just an example numbers and example products where we try to get down the retail price, what's the actual hard cost of the good, what's the actual pick and pack, to pick it off the shelf, to package it up in a package, whatever. What is the gateway processing? So if you're on Shopify and pretty much any other portal that allows you to put something on and people to buy, there's some kind of a gateway fee. So that's on Stripe or Shopify, whatever that is. There's any other costs associated with it. Maybe there's variable packaging that you have to take into account. And then the weight, and then what the actual shipping cost is. Because until you know this and you know it down to the actual penny, can you then actually see what are the things I can play with? And then once we have that, then we have here the hard costs, the hard profit per order or per product if you sold it, what's the gross profit, and then the gross profit percentage. So like this is where we start here because this is the first step. So every brand has to do this step first. For every product you sell, what are the exact numbers so you know the gross profit, the cost, as well as what is the cost associated with it. So that's step number one. Now, step number two is once you have that, is there's many different tools. This is a simple tool that we use with brands where then we can try to see spending scenarios of how much you'll make. So for example,
you're still on the same screen, by the way, bro.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
so this is a calculator. This is a calculator we use to help us forecast and just set some baselines of what can we expect if we spend certain revenue targets based off of the product numbers I showed you. So very simply, how you start with is, what is your revenue target? You put that there. What is your average order value? And then it spits out what's the number of orders you have to hit that revenue threshold. Then you make some assumptions. Every forecast, every planning you ever do, there are assumptions you make, and that's okay. Then you make an assumption. So what's your ad spend you want to spend? Typically, if you're a brand and you rely on advertising to scale your brand or to get orders, that's going to make up a big bulk of your spend. But if you're a brand and you get a lot of organic traffic, maybe you don't have to spend as much, but just make an assumption. Well, how much am I willing to spend on marketing efforts or advertising? Then it calculates what's the spend limit daily, what's the overall CPA you're trying to hit, and that comes out with your MER. So this comes out with what's your target MER. Then this calculator will allow you to put in your hard numbers, right? To forecast net profit. You put in, again, why this is the first step, your cost of goods sold, your merchant center fees, and then it spits out how much gross profit after advertising you can expect if these other scenarios pan out, right? Then if you know your overhead expenses, you put that in here and it can actually try to forecast your net profit. So this is a great tool that we use every time we kickstart working with a brand to say, okay, here's where you're at. One, let's tweak these few things, rerun the calculator, and how much better off are you? Or if we're trying to scale very aggressively, what will that look like assuming these scenarios, and what net profit will that turn into?
Yeah, can you talk everyone through, for row 17, can you talk everyone through target is 7 MER? How does that get put in? What kind of conversation does that look like with a brand, for example? Because I mean, that's not templated. Just going, boom, target 7 MER for every right.
Yes.
So
yeah. So this is a target that a brand had where their target was 7x MER. So, but when you hear what the target is, you want to see, is this realistic? So that we can also reverse engineer what has to happen to make that realistic. There's a lot of nuances, but for example, if you're a brand and most of your traffic comes from paid efforts and your target is 7x, unless you have some extenuating circumstances like a great LTV or a really high AOV, that's going to be hard. So what we do is we put on the right-hand side what the target is, and then using this calculator, kind of reverse engineer and walk into what is a realistic target. Now, many things can change a target. What if you don't spend as much on ads? What if you get all that traffic through organic means? Is that realistic in and of itself? So it's just a great way for us to baseline what the target is, and is that realistic mathematically? And then that gap, so this big gap that we have between 7 and 4.55, what has to change to make that happen? Or was our target a little pie in the sky and it wasn't realistic to begin with?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially if we go back to the previous conversation around the product retail price and the cost of goods, average order value, and we're kind of talking about the same thing we talk about like almost every other episode, right? Like unit economics are such a big thing because of the fact that the flow-on effect is how it impacts performance marketing metrics and targets to be able to hit. And then the flow-on effect from that is, okay, well, based off of that, how are we looking at site conversion rate? How are we looking at CPMs? How are we looking at all the different ways that we can start working towards, one, setting the MER target, but then also two, an MER target that fits the business outcomes that are desired, that are required by the business, right? And then two, from that, how to actually hit those MER targets too. And I think that's where it's a collection of performance marketing, or rather paid media, but also at the same time, you kind of, especially if your MER target's starting to climb up a little bit, you got to figure out a way to leverage email, SMS in there too. Like extract the maximum value from the customers that you've already paid to acquire, because then that adds to your marketing efficiency ratio, and then your organic efforts as well, to be able to pull all those things in. And now you have like essentially, not just one marketing channel of just paid, right?
Yeah. And that's the danger. And I think there isn't a magic bullet, a silver bullet. There isn't like a magic wand. Is you have to know the details, the economics, every single number, and then know where are your opportunities. Because, for example, so I'm going to share my screen again. We actually just made a training because this will illustrate that point really well, where we have a brand right here. This brand, for example, nothing else has changed. I mean, by the way, we call this a snowball strategy. Nothing else has changed in this business besides tweaking the things that we've been talking about. So we looked at pricing of a particular product, increase that price, okay? Quit advertising and promoting products that weren't as profitable, because we knew all the costs, all the gateway processing fees, the picking and packing fees of every single product, changed shipping thresholds. And by tweaking things that they're already doing, but changing the focus, changing the pricing, it allowed us to get a significant lift by really changing nothing else. So I think that was just a really great add-on to what you said, is by doing that, leveraging email and SMS the right way, it doesn't always have to be ad spend and ads is going to fix my problems. No, there's probably things you're doing right now, what you're focusing on, what percentage of split, your marketing efforts are going to which product, raising your prices. That right there can make such marginal differences to then, if you want to just take home more profit, that's cool. Or just more money you can funnel back into the business to actually scale.
Do me a favor, share that screen again. Because I think it might not have been as obvious for the people looking at it, what they were looking at besides those red arrows. Do me a favor, talk us through the change, because I can see a bold, like first row, I can see a bold number, and then the number that's grayed out and not as bold. That 29% increase, is that the change, the outcome change?
That is the change. Yes, that is the change in gross sales. Correct. So
right,
a 29 increase in gross sales, and obviously that's 29%. Reduction of 205. I'm sorry, an increase in returns, an increase of 38% in net sales, but also an increase of 63% in shipping revenue. Obviously, people paying you more for shipping. And this goes back to what we just said, but this is a good visual, is if you know your product costs, you know what revenue sources or marketing channels are bringing the money, what effort and focus you're putting on different product collections, SKUs, and your customer types, you can change marginal percentage differences in all four of these pillars that make up massive differences in your top line and bottom line. And that's really so this is like the strategy, but the brass tacks of when you actually incorporate it, what we've been talking about so far is this is the actual real change it can have. And it doesn't always have to be an ad fix. Yeah, ads are great, but there's a lot of times more impactful decisions in your business happen in the details.
Yes. All right. You just hit a nerve right there. The amount of the overwhelming percentage, the most frequent thing that happens, right? The most frequent conversation that we receive, especially on the front, is, "Hey D, hey Ray, like I heard about your agency, this, that, and that. We have an ad problem." Right.
Yeah.
And then we talk through it, and we take them through our initial review, and we audit their stuff, and we look at their numbers, and we spit out some creative for them, all that stuff that we do at the front. And then we come out the other side and we go, okay, well, we've looked at all this stuff. It ain't an ad problem. Yeah. Or at least it ain't just an ad problem, right? It's also this and this and this. And I understand how it can get overwhelming. Even when you were just talking about before, change the strategy, change the pricing, change the this, change the that, change the product page, change my name, change my kid's name, like, change my tax file, like all that stuff. I know how it might sound like everything is changing at the one go or within a week, right? That's not how it goes. The conversation, and the reason why I'm bringing this up is because I want to make sure that whoever is doing this or is attempting to do this understands that at the underpinning of all of this still requires to be some type of scientific method to look at all of this and go, well, what is the hypothesis here? How do we test one variable sensibly and observe what the change is from that initial experiment, right? We're calling it an experiment because the point is we do not know for sure. If we knew, we would have done it already. But we sure as hell have a hypothesis to say that the hypothesis is we change this, it would improve that. Change A, it improved B to a certain threshold or a certain number, right? But then, so thinking about changing everything, too overwhelming. Thinking about changing one thing and being methodical, too slow, right? But I want to do everything now. There's a real danger to doing everything now, because if you changed everything, if you changed 6 things and something changed on the after the fact, you can't quite really say which of those 6 things were the key contributor to that positive change that you wanted. So now the next time you need to make some change, do you have to do all 6? What if you did 1? Then you start losing then you start losing yourself. So I get how brand owners or anyone that wants to see results feels like it needs to move really quickly, and the best way to move quickly is do all of it at once, right? The way we try to move quickly, at least, is kind of use those PDCA cycles, plan, do, check, and adjust, to then run those experiments as quickly as possible. And that's why we're always constantly talking to brands about, like, well, at the very start, let's come up with as many concepts as possible, but also at the very start, give us all of the creative that you have so far, and we can already start getting to work to then be able to get into.
It's not even that long, too. Like, you make a change this week, measure it for a week or two, Cool. Does it confirmed or denied? Then make the next change. Like all those, that example of that change of the brand that we worked with, that was really over like a month or a month and a half to make, 4 or 5 changes. That's really not that long of a time. So just like take your time, be patient, change the one thing to make sure there's no like negative business impact. If it's a positive impact, great, then move on to the next one. So it's like really not that long if you think about it. But yeah, like a lot of brands want to do everything at once, but no, just march your way there, one implementation at a time, and it'll go much faster than you think. And also the impact will be much more clear of like what's actually doing the biggest impact.
Right. And the measure of time really is impacted by the measure of how quickly the feedback loop, the data can come back, right? So if you're working with a brand that has a decent amount of spend per day, like they're hitting they're hitting a decent amount of eyeballs, enough to get statistical significance back, then we can validate really, really quickly. And this is where the conversation around like daily spend comes into play. If your daily spend is $50, right? The amount of impressions, the amount of eyeballs that actually interact with and go through that experience is so limited that that's where time starts to expand and things feel like they go a bit slowly. So in a sense, in this scenario, money does buy you time, so to speak, right? Because it's buying you the traffic to then go through, to then get exposed to that certain piece of creative or pieces of creative, to then go through all the web, the URL redirects, product page, checkout experience, see the messaging, all that. You want to go next level, put like a heat map on it. You start to be able to see how users are interfacing, especially if you're doing CRO type stuff. That entire experience, that's where time kicks in, right? If you have low spend, it is going to take time. If you have higher spend and you have a strong plan at the start, an experimentation and implementation plan, we can blaze through that fairly quickly, especially if the concepts and the creatives are already locked and loaded, ready to go, right? Which,
I was going to say that as long as you have something on the back end, whether that's you in-house or if you have an agency that has the actual framework and the system to keep up that rate of testing and implementation, because I think we all know it's very easy to like have the idea of testing quickly and going through a lot of concepts quickly, but someone has to be the one executing it. For example, we have a brand who's trying to spend $1 million in 30 days. We have 3 designers working on that brand to test new ads every 2 days. So like you just have to make sure, but that's also a lot of spend too. So you have to make sure you have the framework of the team behind it to reinforce that, because you can move very quickly. But if you don't, you're going to be frustrated because like you can't move fast enough and you want to spend more, but you can't implement fast enough. So just make sure you think through that implementation, like who's going to actually execute that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one thing to know all the different things that you can test. It's another thing to know where to start, what's next, and then go sequentially that way and not lose your nerve in between. It's a whole other different ball game, especially, and we've gone through, I'm pretty sure you and I started our careers knowing all the things that we could test. And then it's through getting punched in the face multiple times, right? And having embarrassing moments where we eventually learn, it's about the sequence as well. And not every sequence is the same for every single brand. You just don't roll out the same exact thing too.
It's so funny you say that. I was jamming with some like really good copywriters this past week at different events at agency founders, but also at a mastermind I was in. And these are the type of copywriters that people pay them a lot of money to write VSLs, to write landing pages. And there's one thing all copywriters have in common. There's one thing they all have, and that is the good ones, is they will write 100 headlines and pick 2 or 3 versus trying to test every headline. No, they get a lot of content, a lot of ideas, and pick the best ones. I think that's really interesting. Based off what you said is, there's a lot of things to test, and that's okay. Have a framework where you can write them down, you can see them visually, whatever that is, and then pick the best of the best, because you don't have the time to test everything. You may not have the money, but also your first 30 ideas are probably going to suck anyway. So like spend the time more in ideation, then pick the best from that huge list.
Yeah. the uh, the creative process of divergent thinking to go into let the brain go into all the different areas. We're not in edit filtration mode just yet. And then once all that stuff is out in front of you, to then go into convergent thinking to go, okay, how do we funnel this through the thinking through into now a sequence of steps that need to get taken to get to that like desired outcome. Right. Yeah, man, it's it's funny talking about this with you out loud because one, I think we do this day in, day out, and our teams do this day in, day out, and we have conversations about it all the time, that it becomes a bit commonplace. But even as I'm saying it out loud, it's really striking me how on the receiving end, especially if you've never been in this world before or played at this scale before, it can seem really overwhelming. It can seem like there's a lot going on. That's why we're constantly trying to,
of course,
right? Like that's why we're constantly trying to, a big part of I think our teams and our strategists' skill set is to be able to break these things down in easily understood ways, so that you don't feel like it's some kind of Google engineer, like Google DeepMind engineer, just talking at you and be like, first this thing has to happen, and then like the code injection has to da-da-da-da. And you're going, I can't make sense of any of this. So scale to the moon or what? Like,
well, but it is hard. Like it's like our job is to simplify the reality of how hard things really are. Like it's not easy to make an ad that scales. It's not easy to scale a brand. It's not easy to make a landing page that doubles your conversion rate. It is hard but you have so many at bats and you have good frameworks and processes and also experience. You can simplify it down into the principles that we always talk about on this podcast. But it is hard. And that's why so many people struggle, because you just don't get to see as many brands as we get to see. You don't have as much experience. But once you have seen the principles and you understand the fundamentals, you see the themes that's frankly just a shortcut to skip all of those scars you have to learn along the way.
Yeah. And it's a tricky place because there is a certain level of difficulty or skill set required and capability required to do the stuff that we do, and deliver what we promise to the brands that come to us. Then there's this other layer up the top of that, which is more difficult, is getting an expert to explain the way that they're thinking through something in an understandable way, instead of them just going, "What do you mean? I just do it."
Yeah.
Right. Like, right. If a brand owner or like if a client's just sitting there, be like, "So talk me through the thinking. Like, how are you getting to this place? Like, what? I just know. I just do it." It's so hard to relate from a brand owner standpoint to be like, I'm screwed here, aren't I? It's this person can't explain anything to me. They can't explain their process. Clearly they look like they know what they're doing, but I have to look into the ad account. I might be a designer. I don't know what's happening there. Results are coming in, but I can't enter into conversation with this person because for them, it's so intuitive. It's so tacit that they just go, "What do you mean? I just touch and feel, like I put it in my mouth, taste it, salt, sugar. I know they need some cinnamon." It's like, yo, if you can break that down, I can come to your level and now we can kind of go through this together. That's always such an interesting thing, interesting challenge to me, especially when we get to this podcast, because we're surfacing so many of these conversations in a format that like there is a viewer and they need to be able to understand. So even as me hearing you talk about something or me talking about, I'm like, is that too complex, bro? Like, or is that too underbaked because there's so much going on underneath? We don't want to tell them every single thing. We don't have 6 hours and it's not an entertaining watch. But how do we just give the crystallized top line TLDR the most, I guess, instead of metrics that matter, it's like the bullet points that matter, right?
Well, I think I might have freaked people out by mentioning 100 headlines and pick the only 2 or 3 that matter. The point of it is,
but that's the cool part. I don't think it'll freak people out because I think that's the cool part. The cool part because
anyone listening to it, anyone I tell that to, they're like, "I don't have time to write 100 headlines." I'm like, you don't, but you're sacrificing short-term time for long-term gain, and that is what makes all the difference.
Yeah. You don't have time. Whenever I encounter people like that, whether it's coming up with a plan, or whether it's thinking through a problem properly, or whether it's, coming up with a whole bunch of drafts before they get to the stuff, I always go, you don't have time to write 100 headlines. Do you have time to troubleshoot 100 failed ads?
Yeah.
Like you know what I mean?
Time to make 100 failed ads. Yeah.
Right. Like anytime you detract away from proper planning or proper drafting, you are just borrowing time from the fires that you're creating in the future. That's pretty much all it is. I used to work in TV, bro. Like, it is a famous myth, not myth. It's a famous fable in our industry that the first Toy Story draft was unusable, and they had to lock all the writers up in a room. Yeah, the first Toy Story draft was unusable. Woody was a complete asshole. Buzz was like out in, like, it just made no sense. There was no chemistry. There was no point to this, like, none of it. That's the first draft, right? And that's the stuff. That's the thing that gets optioned around in Hollywood, and then they find the right writers, they cram them into a room, and then they go through that period, and that's how you get to a Toy Story. Like, most movies that we watch, the 3 hours, it doesn't take 3 hours to film a movie. Some movies take like 3 years to get to that, and then that's how you get to blockbuster, chart topping, like highest revenue type scenarios. So it's the same concept, right? It's the same concept. It's spending the time up the front and then being able to break all these things down so that when a competitor, let's bring it all the way home, so that when a competitor like Temu comes in and tries to pretty much what us Asian people say, take your rice bowl, you're already going, well, there's enough planning and thinking and robustness in here for us to either pivot, persevere, or move fast, but we can move. We're not just kind of sitting ducks, right? And we have
that is the one benefit. Going back to Temu is they're spread so thin, you can outbeat them because you can go deeper than they'll ever go on one product, or whatever your product is. So you can beat them by going deeper than they'll ever go.
For sure. AliExpress has been around for years. Wish.com been around for years, right? Those products have been available in the market for a long time. Temu, newer player. Shein, kind of in the middle, right? So it's not, oh, Temu's here, wrap up shop. It's how do the smart, resourceful ones, how are they able to then, in spite of that, navigate these waters, right? But regardless of Temu, and this is where I think it really hits home for me, regardless of Temu, regardless of Shein, you are still competing in a market where other brands, other companies are providing the same service or selling the same or similar product as yours. So the need to have an edge will never go away.
Never.
So all that we're talking about here is just finding that edge. And then once you establish what that edge is, doubling down on it, so that, and having a framework to double down, because once you're doubling down, you have a team that can execute, you can then go find that next edge, because the market will always catch up or be ahead of you. So that game never stops, right? Bro, we went through a lot of ground. Good luck for you watching this. If this made sense at all, let us know in the comments, please. I do want to do something.
If Temu's killing you guys, hit us up. We have some strategies that can help, but just go deeper than Temu. That's the answer.
Right. And let Ray, you down to, shall we package up and just make like a publicly shareable view for the calculator? And for like those two little templates, I'll throw it into the description. Y'all can have it. I'm not going to put up, I don't care about collecting your emails for this one. Like, just go take it, start using it, please. But if you do start using it, or if you do get stuck, can you let us know in the comments, please? So that way we can kind of go, okay, well, clearly we didn't explain this well enough. And we can take it from there. But really want you guys to have at least those two little usable templates. You can start smooshing numbers around and seeing what makes sense, right? All right, dude. Good episode. Good. Don't know what the next one's going to be like. Everyone, thank you so much for your time, as always. And we'll see you next episode. And I promise we'll shake shit up so it's not always just like know your numbers. Like we'll make it something else. See you, everyone.